Hello, my name is Chris, and today I would like to do something a little different. I'd like to deviate away from the subject of quitting smoking. Just for this week, I'm focused instead on my training to become a professional person-centered counsellor and what that experience has been like for me. The reason I'm doing that and not talking about quitting smoking this week is very simple and kind of boring. So I'm reaching the end of my third year as a trainee counsellor. Due to the pandemic, I still have a few more hours that I need to make up in order to properly qualify. But having reached the end of this third year, I spent the last couple of weeks working very hard on assignments. I had a big research project that I had to get done. And as such, I just haven't really had the time nor the mental capacity to do a good enough job of making a quit smoking video that might be helpful or insightful. So instead, I thought I'd use this time to just reflect about what's been on my mind, which is counselling. And I'd like to share with you a little bit about why I ended up training to be a counsellor in the first place. I want to share with you 3 things about the experience that have been frustrating, disappointing, or just not that great. And then I'll end on a positive note by sharing with you 3 things about training to be a counsellor that have been so wonderful, so worthwhile, and so beneficial to me. Before we get into that, very quick reminder, the next live stream hangout will be Saturday, May 29th at 6:30 p.m. UK time. The link to that is in the description below and in the card above, so you can use that to set a notification so that you won't forget if you do want to come and hang out. And it would be wonderful to see you. I've enjoyed the last couple of live streams immensely and I'm very much looking forward to the next one. So it'd be great to see you there. But for now, let's dive into this video and talk about my experiences training to become a professional counsellor. So, my story starts in 2017 when I went through this really dark period of depression that I've spoken about and referenced in many other videos on this YouTube channel. It wasn't the first time that I'd been depressed, it wasn't even the last time that I've ever been depressed, but it was the worst time. I spent days, weeks, I think maybe a month or more, stuck inside my house with the curtains drawn 24 hours a day, barely ever moved off the sofa unless it was to go to the toilet or fetch food. All I did was sleep, eat and just feel awful. And I reached out to the NHS in England, we have the National Health Service, I reached out to them to try and get some help, and the help was very sorely lacking and just wasn't really fit for purpose. I wasn't really listened to, I wasn't really offered any help that, I would say, well, I've had this help before and it didn't work for me. And the doctor said, well, just do it again. And I came away from the doctors feeling so disappointed, disheartened and frustrated, and kind of realised at that point that if I was ever going to get better, I would have to get myself better. Which I ended up doing. And how I did that, again, is a whole different subject for a whole different video. But I started to get better and I started to reflect on, I wonder how many other people have reached out to their doctor or their healthcare provider for their mental health and not got the support that they need. And I wonder if there's something that I can do so that maybe just one person could get the help that they need. I also, reflected on the work that I was doing. So I was working as a freelance writer, and although that was something that I wanted to do since being a kid, it wasn't really serving me and was kind of, the pressures of dealing with clients and things was impacting my mental health. So I knew I wanted to do something different and I knew I wanted to do something worthwhile. I knew that if I just went through a really dark period of depression and then kind of dusted myself and got on with life as if it had never happened, then I kind of question what that experience was for. Whereas if I could go through that period of depression and use it to help someone, it would make that experience worthwhile. It was like, okay, that was an awful period in my life, but it was worth it, and it served a purpose because it guided me towards helping others, and it, served as a tool that I can use in when I'm working with people, because I can empathize, I think, with people. This isn't to say that I wanted to go out and save the world or be like, I can fix everybody. I can't. I just felt that if I could use my experiences again to help even one person, it would be worth it. But I didn't really know how I was going to do that, or how I exactly wanted to help someone. In the back of my mind, I already had an interest in hypnotherapy. It didn't really cross my mind at that time that maybe I could eventually train to be a hypnotherapist, which I have now done. It did inspire me to work on my YouTube channel. I'd made a few videos in 2016 when I was first quitting smoking, but it was 2017, after the depression, that I really started to focus on this. But even this, I've never wanted to be a full-time YouTuber. I've never wanted this to be my job. This is something that I enjoy and get tremendous value out of. And I think if this was what I had to do to put a roof over my head, that the whole experience would be very different and I wouldn't enjoy it as much. So I'm very happy with the success of this YouTube channel, but I knew it wasn't something that I wanted to blow up and have millions of subscribers or whatever. And then it was only, I'd gone out for a coffee with someone who was training to be a counsellor, and she was at the level that I'm at now. We were talking, she was telling me about something that was going on in her life, and I started reflecting back, using what I know now, to be counselling skills. And she said to me, have you ever considered training to be a counsellor? And I said, no, but now that you mention it, it sounds exactly like the kind of thing I was looking for. So I started looking around at how I might do this, and it was way out of my budget. Because of that period of depression that I went through, and because I was self-employed, I ended up broke. I had no money left to pay for training. And then very sadly, my nan passed away at the end of 2017, and again that's a whole different subject for a whole different video. But she left me just a couple of £100 in her will, and that paid for my training. That paid for the first 3 months of my training, and I figured I just have to go for this. This is, my nan has helped me. The last thing she ever did was help me on my path to a new career. So I owe it to her and to myself to get this started and just trust that I will find a way, which I so far have. I've been training ever since. And the experience of training to be a counsellor has been wonderful, annoying, frustrating, exciting, eye-opening. It has been the best thing I've ever done. It's been the hardest thing. It's been so many different things. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to start by sharing with you 3 things about the experience that haven't been that great. This is not because I like having a moan and complain, but because if I do the worst things about training to be a counsellor first, then I get to end this video on a positive note. And that to me seems like the best way to go. So let's look at the 3 things that I haven't really enjoyed about training to be a counsellor. The first thing that has been kind of disappointing about training to be a counsellor is that I found the experience to be far more heavily focused on theory and writing assignments than actual practice. Don't get me wrong, I've had a lot of actual practice too, but I've done far more writing about counselling than I've done actual counselling. And that does not sit right with me at all. I absolutely understand the value of theoretical work. It's okay to do what we do, but it's vitally important to understand the how and the why of what we do as well. And I've been very, very lucky the last 2 years of my course to have a teacher who is just a genius at the theory side of things, and has really helped to cement my understanding and give me a much greater insight into the how and why of counselling. But I still feel like, you know, this is a practical course and we should have done more practical work. We did this whole huge assignment about things like working within an organisation and contracts and all this stuff, but which is important, but the level to which we covered it was excessive. We did I had to write this whole thing about the importance of endings, like ending a single counselling session and ending a series of counselling sessions. And we had to write about how important this is and how to do it properly, but never actually got sat down and said, okay, here's what you do, and had any opportunity to actually practice that. The idea seems to be you just instinctively trust, and if you know the theory you can apply it, but I would have loved to have had more practical time just to work on actual practicing skills than just writing about it. Again, we have done both, but I just feel it's very heavily weighted towards the theory, and that doesn't sit right with me. You know, counselling is not an academic exercise. I'm not in counselling to prove how clever I am or how much I know about conditions of worth and unconditional positive regard. I feel like counselling is at its core a very spiritual process, and I don't mean like spiritual woo kind of, you know, chakras and all that. I just mean it's about, you know, it's about, counselling is about human connection, and I would have preferred to have spent more time connecting with humans than writing about connecting with humans. The second thing that has really just disheartened me was the kind of the attitudes and the way that other trainee counsellors and even qualified counsellors speak to each other online. So when I first started counselling, you know, you get really passionate about something, you want to dive into it and you know, surround yourself with it. So you go on like social media and you dive into all of the counselling groups that there are, which I did, and oh my goodness, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There's one counselling group on Facebook which is huge, and it's mainly for people in England, but people from all over the world join it too. And it's focused, you know, specifically for counselling students. It's run by two guys who help counselling students. I'm not going to mention the name of it, but if you know anything about counselling in England, you probably know it. And the experience, they have their own Facebook group, and my experiences in that group were just awful. It was people bickering all the time and doing what I came to call empathy shaming. So being a counsellor, we focus so much on having empathy. And, you know, people would get into disagreements and then go, well, you're not being very empathetic, are you? Or doing it really like passively aggressively and going, I wonder where your empathy is. So like, you know, it was like this thing of like, you're not fit to be a counsellor, or I'm more fit to be a counsellor than you. It was really awful. At one point there was a guy who was a qualified counsellor and was kind of like some big academic dude came into the group. It was when the last elections were on, and he said, he made this big post that if you vote for a particular political party, then you are not fit to be a counsellor. I was like, oh my goodness. Like, to be fair, I wasn't going to vote for that particular party anyway, but I couldn't believe that this was the kind of thing that was going on. Obviously, I think, you know, maybe if you're a Nazi or you have like really extreme views, then that's maybe not so great, but I don't think it's anyone's place to say who is and who isn't. Well, it kind of is, in terms of it's my tutor's responsibility to say if I'm fit enough to practice, but it just struck me as a very odd thing, you know, you're not fit to be, even though I know nothing about you, if you vote for a different political party to me, that means you're not fit to be a counsellor. I was like, I am done with that. There are other groups where it just seems to be counsellors complaining all the time that they're not getting paid enough. And again, that strikes me as just very odd. When I originally came up with the idea that I want to be a counsellor, the money aspect never came into play. It was never about, I'm going to train to be a counsellor and, make a load of money. Even when I started my training and I started looking around at, what do counsellors make and what can you charge and all this stuff. And I knew what I was getting into. I know that it's very difficult to get a job as a counsellor. I know that setting up a private practice is very hard. I know that there is a lot of, you're basically being paid like minimum wage or thereabouts. And I absolutely understand why that can be disheartening. But all the arguments are, well, I've trained very, very hard for very many years and spent a lot of money. I deserve to be charging like £50 an hour for counselling. No, I don't think that's the case, right? Even I charge what I charge for my hypnotherapy, but if you come to me for hypnotherapy, you're not paying for my decision to train to be a hypnotherapist. You're not paying for my training, my course. You're not paying for all the hours that I put in. That was my decision to do that. What you're paying for is the value that I can bring to your life. What you're paying for is the help that I can give you. You don't really necessarily care how long I've trained for. The same with counselling, right? None of us are entitled to make a living as a counsellor. None of us are entitled to make loads of money. I kind of knew what I was getting into, and there's a lack of funding for counselling, and I get that it's an issue, but I'm very much looking forward, once I qualify, to being able to volunteer as a counsellor. I'll still have to figure out a way to use counselling to make a living, but I'm looking very much forward to being able to offer my services to some extent for free, so that people who can't afford it can get the help they need. Like I said, when it was 2017 and my mental health was in the toilet and I was financially broke, I couldn't afford to pay a counsellor £40 an hour. So I had to help myself, and it was very hard. So yeah, it's a tough one, right? Money is important in as much as we need it to keep a roof over our heads, but I just felt very disappointed to find so many qualified counsellors just complaining all the time about how they're not getting paid enough. And the third and final thing that just is on my mind is simply this: the absolute frustration of trying to secure a counselling placement, as well as the endless amounts of theory and written work that we have to do. We also have to go out and complete 100 hours of counselling within a placement setting, like working with real clients in a charity or organisation. And just trying to get that off the ground has just been the most frustrating experience of my life. Obviously, the pandemic has not helped. But nor has the attitudes and lack of organisation that I keep facing when I've been trying to get my placement started. I phoned one place in the town where I used to live, and the lady on the phone was very blunt and she felt rude to me. Hi, I'm just calling because I'm a trainee counsellor and I'd like to inquire about training placement opportunities. No, we're not doing that, thank you. Bye. What? And I called again a few months later, and it was saying, I'm sorry, we can't help with that, goodbye. Just very rude and very blunt. And this was a counselling service, right? They don't do anything else apart from counsel people, and this is what the lady's like who answers the phone. Then I went to another place, and I actually went and met the lady in person. This was a lady who ran a counselling service. We had a great interview. I told her all about myself. She told me about the placement. Came away feeling really good about it. She emailed me afterwards, said, here's the paperwork that you need to be able to start your placement. Fill this in, we'll get you started. And I thought, great. filled in the paperwork, sent it back, and I never heard from that lady ever again. I think the cool kids call it ghosting. This lady ghosted me, right? I called her, I emailed her, I texted her, I sent smoke signals. I never heard from her again. And again, this is someone who is a professional counsellor running a counselling service that is just going to basically abandon people. And I think that's just very weird. So it's been just the most frustrating experience to get this placement off the ground. But it's not one of those things that has made me go, F this, I'm not going to do it anymore, because it is absolutely worth it. Because there's been so much good, so much good about training to be a counsellor. And one of the three things that I have loved the most is that I've been very blessed and very fortunate to have some really good teachers, all of whom have been really good in different ways. My level 2 course, we were taught by this absolutely lovely woman whose passion and enthusiasm for counselling really inspired me and really convinced me that, yeah, this is what I want to be doing. I moved on to my level 3 course. I had this wonderful, very experienced tutor who was excellent at the practical side of things. You know, my level 3 course, we actually did do a lot of practical counselling training, and she was very good at that. You know, so I learned a lot from her. And then on my level 4 course, we've been taught by this guy who's just excellent with the theory, and has really, like I said earlier, it really helped me to understand the hows and the whys and all the mental side of doing what we do, and I really value that. The other really good thing about training to be a counsellor is that it convinced me to go and get some therapy for myself. I've had, you know, things like CBT and that in the past, but I went and actually, you know, I saw a therapist for about a year. I think we only finished a couple of months ago, and that experience was an absolute game changer and really did so many wonderful things for me. I ended up with this lady. We sort of went back over the course of my life and addressed things, and I was able to see my life in a very different way and gained a whole new perspective and understanding and a lot of self-growth, and I absolutely value that experience. And I value that experience not just for what I've learned about myself, but from what I've learned about counselling. So this counsellor who worked with me knew that I was a counselling therapist and would sometimes challenge me. She'd say, Chris, now, if you were with a client and they said what you've just said to me, what would you say to them? And I would always go, I don't know. but it was really helpful, you know, to be able to be in, like, she was kind of a mentor and a therapist, and I really value that experience. And the third thing that has just been, I mean, there's more, you know, I've made wonderful friends and had some amazing experiences, but the third and most important thing that has just been a positive is just absolutely reinforcing the value of just being with someone. Not trying to fix them, not trying to change them, not trying to get them to do anything at all, just kind of being with them, hearing them, and I am with you, you know, I get it, I am with you. I remember once when I used to go to 12-step meetings, and before I'd left, I put my hand on a hot stove and burned the heck out of my hand. Phoned my friend who's a nurse. I said, what do I do? She said, just wrap it in a cold cloth. So I did that, went to the AA meeting, and in the meeting I shared whatever I was thinking, and then I said, oh, by the way, if you're wondering why I've got a cloth on my hand, it's because I burnt my hand, but it is clearly, I have clearly already taken care of it. Nobody, not one person in that meeting heard me say, I am clearly taking care of it. Let's say there were 15 people in that meeting. I got 15 different opinions about what I should do about my burnt hand. 15 different opinions that I never asked for. 15 different opinions that clearly ignored the fact that, look, I'm dealing with this. So I've got this very thing, you know, like, about unsolicited advice and people not listening and just trying to fix. I mean, you could argue, you know, that I make these videos every week, which is kind of unsolicited advice, but, you know, you don't have to watch this video if you don't want to. You know, and I think that's very different from, you know, if you said to me, well, Chris, I've quit smoking, but I'm okay about it and it's going great, and me saying, well, okay, here's what you need to do to quit smoking. No, I've heard that you've said, I've got this. And I absolutely appreciate the value of just being with another person, holding space for them. Thank you so much for basically listening to me vent for the last 20 minutes. I really needed this, and I didn't realise how much I needed it until just now. We will get back to quitting smoking stuff next week, I promise you. Actually, no, I don't promise you, because then if I don't, you can't hold me to that. Like I said, the next live stream is Saturday, May 29th, 6:30 p.m. UK time. Again, thank you so much for watching. I know this has been different, but I really hope that at the very least you don't feel like I've wasted your time. I will see you next week. Goodbye.